Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Next Door NetAdmin. It is the end of another month. It is the end of the month of May, and that means it is time for a Freeform video. But you'll have already noticed I'm in a very different place than I usually would be. So where am I, and what am I doing? Well, first of all, the place. It's a hotel room. I know, hard to believe that I could actually ever go to a hotel. All IT guys are supposed to stay inside, usually in the basement, right? Yeah, not always. Cool. But what am I doing here? Well, I have been helping out with a convention from Thursday all the way through to when I'm recording this Sunday night. And okay, but what have I been doing? It's not a stretch to imagine that a lot of what I've been doing has been IT related. And in fact, it has been. I have been assisting, not leading, but assisting with IT for this particular convention. And specifically, my area of focus has been the central server and database for the convention. So that's everything that works with attendee registrations, that has been everything to do with logging tasks, logging lost and found items, pulling all the information, the stuff that helps power the decisions and experiences of a lot of the people who come through here so that they can get their badge, move on to some of the other events, and enjoy themselves. So, there's a lot that goes into that. This isn't the best place to get into all of the details on that, particularly because since I'm on the road, I don't really have a lot of editing capability to be able to do a lot of show and tell or to illustrate any of the stuff that I would talk about. But I can tell you that a large part of what this is built on is just a traditional lamp stack. What's a lamp stack? A lamp stack is a term that is used to include an operating system, Linux, that's the L, Apache, which is a particular web server. Then there's MySQL, which is your actual database. And then there's PHP, which is a dynamic language to help generate web pages that are pulling information out of the MySQL database. I'm not going to go into all of the details on that, particularly in a free form, which is supposed to be more free form and less discussion based. But that being said, it has been a decent convention. It has been a very populous convention. We just doubled in size from the last year. And that's not something anybody was really expecting up until about a month ago. So there's definitely growing pains when you jump in size that dramatically, because you don't jump in the number of volunteers that you have by that corresponding percentage. You don't. You hope that you're growing your volunteers. You hope you're growing with the number of people that are helping run this for all of the people who are coming and enjoying it. That being said, you don't expect to grow your entire staff, your set of volunteers. You don't expect to grow that by 100% in a year. You don't expect that to double, but we just had our attendees double. So yeah, it gets challenging. That's a word I'm going to use. It gets challenging at times, but still, all in all, I would say a very rewarding experience. And that's the biggest thing. is it's rewarding to be able to work with a bunch of people in putting something like this on. And it's rewarding when you know that the attendees, the people who are just coming to the convention to enjoy the convention, when you know that they had a good time too, when you know that you've been able to make somebody's year by being able to say, yes, we have this lost item in our lost and found. It was recorded, here it is. And they go, oh my God, this was something that was 10 years old and it was really important to me and you found it. Thank you so much. Something as simple as that can bring such a moment of happiness, both to the person who is receiving the item that they had lost, but also to the people who are able to assist, and correspondingly to the people who set up the entire skeleton structure of the network, who set up the server, who set up all the systems involved. It's rewarding for everybody, and that's a good thing. A little bit more about the systems that we have here. Everything is run on laptops, including the server. So it makes it a self-contained server, which is fun because it's got its own screen, it's got a keyboard, and cool. It also makes it easy to transport, which is a plus as well. But since everything is on laptops, it makes it really easy to be able to pack things up at night and bring them into a secured location for storage. So you're not leaving your systems out overnight for anybody walking through the hotel. We had, I want to say, easily 6 or 7 workstations for processing registrations, and another 4 that we had for attendees to go through. And then we had another 4 or 5 for operations, where people are tracking things like the lost and found, open tasks, needed items, needed equipment. And yeah, along with that, we have 4, I'm going to say 4 full-page printers. Your standard laser jets, they just print regular 8.5 by 11 printer paper. Yeah. But we also have 4 label printers that specifically print out 3-inch by 1-inch sticky labels that you just peel off and stick on things. That's how we do our attendee badges. And we also have credit card terminals for processing payment, and those require their own specialized setup and receipt paper for the receipts and all the fun stuff that comes with dealing with payment terminals, because those have their own set of requirements that are over and above, shall we say, what the rest of the network needs. And of course, then you need to have a few switches to tie everything together in various locations. You need a router to interface between your internal network and then the hotel network. The hotel gave us a static public IP address this year, but in other years, sometimes it's a dynamic IP. And when it's a dynamic IP, the hotel has a captive portal, because most hotels do have a captive portal these days. But it's not easy to be able to authenticate through that. So then you need to know that you need to get a MAC address. You need to ask the hotel to pass or whitelist the MAC address through their captive portal so that it's not blocked. If you have an isolated payment terminal, as an example, away on the other side of the hotel, and it's not attached to your internal network setup, you may need to take other measures like getting that station's MAC address passed through the captive portal as well, making sure that you're still abiding by all the requirements necessary for the payment terminals, of course. And then you get into things like Wi-Fi. Well, isn't everybody on the hotel Wi-Fi? Most of the time, yes. But if you have a need for wireless devices to run on the internal network, then you have to make sure that you have wireless access points set up as well. It's surprising how a lot of this is invisible to most attendees once you're outside of registration. Everybody sees the computers that are in registration, but a lot of the understanding of how exactly do you set this all up? How do you cart this in? This particular organization I've been working with has in the past used a variety of different systems. We've had laptops that ran Windows. We have had Raspberry Pis. We've had thin clients, Wise terminals. And for those of you who don't know, that's spelled WYSE, Wise terminals. And these terminals typically had just a remote desktop client. That's all they were intended for, was to remote desktop into a mainframe somewhere. But most of them also just had a web browser. And all we really needed was a web browser because it just has to reach the internal web server that runs everything. So those worked fine. And you could get them secondhand for very low amounts of money because they didn't have a full operating system. They couldn't run Office applications. They definitely could not run games. All they could do was a remote desktop connection or a web browser. And that was it. It was kind of, I suppose, a little bit like Chrome OS is these days, where everything is very heavily browser-based. But don't take my word on that, because I have not used Chrome OS, and so that's going entirely on supposition on my part. But we now have laptops that run Linux. Again, all we really need for the most part is a browser, and anything that's capable of running a browser will work with that. We used to have big totes full of keyboards and wired mice and everything like that, so that people aren't having to work on a really cramped keyboard so much. On a laptop, or for a device like a Raspberry Pi, it doesn't have a built-in keyboard, so you'd better supply one. So you have keyboards, you have mice, you have umpteen zillion power cables, you have even more Ethernet cables, helpfully stowed in a box that with a label that says all the cats. I think it may have started as all the Cat 5, but given that we now have Cat 5e and Category 6 and maybe even a little 6a nowadays, who am I kidding? We don't have any 6A here. Never mind. But it's still now all the cats. All right, fine. The way that these things are labeled is just funny sometimes. Regardless, you have all these boxes, all this equipment, and then you basically haul everything into a hotel. When you actually have clearance to do so, your time block has begun, and you spend a good 4 to 6 hours setting everything up, cabling it all, making sure that all the cables are taped down so that there's no tripping hazards, making sure that you're running around through doorways, tape it down, and then you're running it around the walls, and setting up an ad hoc network on the fly that just lasts for the 3 days of the convention. And then on Sunday night, you tear it all back out again. You roll up all the cables, you stow it in the back in the boxes that it came from, and you call it good. We've done it all for another year. Now it's all going back in storage. All the power cables, all the power strips, all the cats, all the laptops. Those typically do not go to a storage locker. We have different secured storage for that. The label printers, those also tend to go to specialized storage because those are a little more specialized equipment, and we don't want to put it in a general locker full of everything else. And then you have the full-page printers, which are generally speaking pretty hardy, although you do need to make sure that you still keep them fed. with changes of toner or new cartridges or new other parts, just the kind of regular things that you would expect printers to need. Yeah, easy enough. And if you're hearing some odd noises from off camera, I'm also sharing this hotel room with a dog. It's not mine, but I do not mind having a dog nearby. So that is a traveling companion, shall we say. Yeah. No, that's the challenges, that's the fun of it. And do I find it rewarding? I find it rewarding to be involved more than anything. I do obviously enjoy IT. It's what I'm good at. It's what I do at my day job, so that's fun. Oh, I could also tell you about some of the fun things that I've done in other events. Not this one, but at other events. At other events, we had a network that was broad enough that it needed to be located in several very discontiguous areas of a convention center and a hotel. So what we would do is we would ask the hotel to essentially provide us a VLAN through their infrastructure. But if you're passing sensitive data over a network that isn't yours to control, do you trust your sensitive information to that network? If you're a network admin and you've got equipment to play with for fun, because this is all volunteer work, so it had better be fun on some level, then what do? You create a VPN. You create a VPN between each and every endpoint, and that might be 4 or 5 different routers, and you have to use different subnets because it's all going through different VPNs over a different, WAN, essentially, that is the hotel's network at this point. You build your routing tables, you do all of that stuff. There's even been 1 or 2 instances where a particularly tricky distance was not bridgeable by the hotel's network. And so in those cases, we would even look at using wireless relay stations to relay a wireless signal by bouncing it off the back, a back rock wall, essentially at the back of a parking lot. That didn't really pan out. So what we ended up doing instead was getting a pair of, older Cisco routers that had T1 telephone cards in them. And then we cabled together parts of the hotel's internal telephone network with their permission, obviously, and created our own mini T1 line, essentially, from one end of the hotel to the other. It wasn't very fast. A T1 was only 1.5 megabit. But it also didn't need to be that fast because we're not passing bucket loads of data here. We're doing just single web pages. And it was for a very, very, very small amount of traffic. And so that worked out. But these are the kinds of creative solutions that you have to be able to wrap your head around and approach and brainstorm and come up with new ways of making things work. Because in a volunteer organization, you can't go out and buy the latest and greatest, nor do you really want to. If you have an event that only runs for 3 or 4 days out of a year and then has everything packed into storage, why would you go out and buy stuff that's new? It doesn't make a lot of sense, particularly for a volunteer or nonprofit organization. So, secondhand materials are just what you use. Would I ever advocate that in a business context? Obviously not. In a business context, you need to find some budget to actually support the business. But if you're talking about a nonprofit or volunteer run event that only runs 3 days out of the year, You don't have a full budget to work with. You just got to be creative. And you got to be a creative shopper, going to used PC recycling places and finding cast offs and asking, maybe even asking businesses if they have anything that is so old that they just want to donate it instead of e-wasting it to a recycler. I've already talked about e-wasting before. This is another way that it can be used. So, yeah, there's a lot of creativity that comes in building and configuring a network, not only to suit the needs of the specific event, but also to match whatever venue you're in, because every hotel is different, every convention center is different. You just got to be able to go into it, make a plan, and then when you roll in, you have to be able to adapt. You have to be able to think on your feet and problem solve and come up with ways of making something work. That's all there is to it. So that's what I've been doing over the last few days. And hopefully that has been somewhat interesting to you as well. I will be back at home for the next video. So until that time, thank you very much for watching. I am your next door netadmin, and we'll see you next time.